I used to love watching my dad cook. He wore this old white apron with a beer stain shaped like Texas. He had a ritual. Blues music on the radio, a cigarette tucked behind his ear, and 2 fingers of bourbon on the counter. He'd dice onions like a machine, sear meat with his eyes closed, hum along to be king while steam fogged up the kitchen windows. But the part one remember most, the part one wish I could forget, is the smell of garlic. It was always strong, like he was trying to cover something else up. Something worse. I didn't start questioning things until I was 15. One night, he made a stew that tasted metallic. He said it was lamb, but I knew better. I'd had lamb. This was stringier, darker. My mom had been gone for almost a year by then. Ran off, he said. Couldn't handle the country life. I believed him, for a while. And if you think that's bad, you won't believe what happened next. It started with the freezer. I was looking for ice cream and found a vacuum-sealed bag shoved behind a roast. It was meat, red, dark, veiny. But it wasn't shaped like any cut I recognized. Long, thin, tapered at the ends. My stomach turned. I asked him about it. He said it was venison. Bought it off a buddy who hunts, he told me. But I grew up in that town. Nobody hunted near us. The woods were posted and everyone knew it. That same night, I snuck back into the kitchen after he passed out drunk and pulled the meat out again. This time I examined it closely. It wasn't a cut of anything. It was a hand. Small, delicate, fingers curled in a half-fist like it had frozen in a spasm. I nearly screamed, dropped it on the linoleum and scrambled back. I stared at it for a long time. The nails were clean. No polish. Just clean. Whoever it had belonged to had probably been young. I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about my mom. She used to wear this silver ring with a tiny emerald. She never took it off. I hadn't seen that ring since she left. So the next day, I did something I had never dared before. I went into his shed. Dad kept it locked, but I'd seen where he hid the key. It was musty inside, filled with hunting gear, tarps, chains. But it was the chest freezer in the back that got me. It was duct-taped shut. I peeled it back, heart thudding, palms slick with sweat. Inside were more vacuum-sealed bags, neatly labeled. Stew, chili, ribs. I opened one. It had a foot in it. Human. Toes shriveled from cold. Black hair stuck to the ankle. I threw up on the concrete floor and ran. I didn't call the cops. I didn't know how. I didn't even know what to say. I just packed a bag and left. He came looking for me 2 days later. Showed up at my friend's house like nothing happened. Smiling, drunk, apron still on. I made your favorite, he said. Why don't you come home, huh? We'll eat together. Like old times. I stared at him and realized something. He wasn't trying to trick me. He wasn't hiding it anymore. He wanted me to know. The nurse said I could see him, but only through a window for now. I didn't understand. I thought the procedure was over. I thought everything was fine. I followed her down the hall. My footsteps felt disjointed from my body, like I was walking underwater. The corridor was silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the low groan of an air vent. She stopped in front of a large window. He's in there. I looked in. My son was lying in a hospital bed, pale but breathing. His lips were slightly parted. A heart monitor beeped steadily beside him, and a nurse was taking his blood pressure. But that wasn't what held my attention. It was the large glass container at the foot of his bed, sealed and wrapped in yellow biohazard tape. Inside it, floating in some kind of greenish fluid, was a clump of the worms. Still alive. Still writhing. I gasped and staggered back. Why would they keep them? The nurse didn't answer at first. Then she said, "They're under observation." Observation for what? I asked, my voice rising. She wouldn't meet my eyes. The CDC has been notified. The what? Wait. Why the hell is the CDC involved? She pressed her lips together. There's a protocol. Unidentified biological specimens. They need to confirm it's not parasitic. It was parasitic, I hissed. It was in him. She turned to me. We don't know that. Could have been something else. I blinked. Something else like what? I'm not qualified to speculate. You'll have to wait for the specialists. But I couldn't wait. Later that evening, a man in a dark suit and a government badge arrived. He introduced himself as Agent Powell. His voice was calm, measured. Too calm. "We need to ask you a few questions," he said, pulling a chair up across from me in the waiting room. "Is that all right?" I nodded. My hands were trembling in my lap. He flipped open a notepad. "When was the first time you noticed something wrong with your son?" I told him everything. How he'd complained of pain, how his testicles had swollen overnight, the ultrasound, the surgery, the worms. He didn't take notes. He just watched me. "And he's had no recent travel history?" he asked. "No. We haven't even left the state." "No contact with unusual animals? Stray dogs? Wild game? Anything out of the ordinary?" "No." "What about his diet? Any new foods? Raw fish? Anything imported?" I stared at him. "He's 5. He nodded, as if that was the answer he expected. Then he stood. "We'll be in touch." He didn't offer any comfort, didn't even say thank you. Just left. They didn't let me stay overnight. Said it was policy, something about infection control. I returned home alone. My house was cold, silent, too clean. I sat in his room for hours. The dinosaur bedspread, the toy chest, the little shoes by the door. I was just about to fall asleep on the edge of his bed when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. A voice whispered on the other end. "He's not sick. He's chosen." "What?" I sat up. Then the line went dead. I tried calling back. No answer. I didn't even have a call log. It was like it never happened. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I got a call from the hospital. They said my son had woken up. He was asking for me. I drove like a madwoman. When I arrived, he was sitting up in bed, eating Jell-O. His cheeks were flushed, eyes brighter than I'd seen in weeks. "Mommy," he smiled. I rushed over, hugged him. "How are you feeling, baby?" "Good," he said. "They took the bugs out." My heart clenched. "Yeah, they did." He looked out the window. "But they weren't bad." I pulled back. "What do you mean?" "They weren't hurting me," he said simply. "They were helping me get ready." I stared at him. "For what?" I asked. He didn't answer, just looked out the window. 2 hours later, the hospital had a power outage. Just a blip, a flicker. But when the lights came back on, his room was empty. The bed empty. The window open. The glass tank holding the worms shattered. They found him an hour later, sitting in the garden behind the hospital, naked, covered in dirt. But that's not what disturbed the nurses the most. What disturbed them was the trail of footprints from his room, made not just by him, but dozens of small, damp prints, like his, but smaller. I tried to take him home after that. They wouldn't let me. Instead, they transferred him to a private facility. Said it was for his safety. No visitors, no calls. It's been 7 months now. I haven't seen my son in 226 days. But sometimes, at night, I hear him, outside my window, whispering my name. This story was completely true, except for all the parts that weren't. Thanks for listening. That's how it happened or didn't. But if it did, don't think it couldn't happen to you. Subscribe to It Happened to Me. A new story drops daily. They call it a containment center. That's what the woman on the phone said. But I've driven past it twice now. It's just a concrete building in the woods, surrounded by 10-foot fences and security cameras. No signs, no names, just guards. The third time I went, I parked half a mile away and hiked through the trees until I found the fence. It was topped with barbed wire. Beyond it, I saw the building again, gray and square like a bunker. A white van was parked near the entrance. 2 men in hazmat suits carried a metal container inside. I waited until they were gone. Then I climbed. My palms bled. My shirt snagged on the wire. I almost fell twice, but I made it over. I ran for the back door. It was locked. I had wire cutters in my bag, but before I could use them, I heard footsteps. Fast, purposeful. I ducked behind a dumpster. Two men came around the corner, one in scrubs, one in tactical gear. They stopped near the van. I couldn't hear everything, but I caught enough. Says the new one's showing signs already. Accelerated growth. Almost 3 times the rate. We can't hold them much longer. Then the guard said something that made my blood run cold. Especially not after what happened to the last kid's mother. They went inside. The door locked behind them. I waited until dark. Then I went back to the fence. On the way out, I found something wedged under a root. A small plastic toy. A dinosaur. My son's favorite. It was half buried in the mud. I clutched it to my chest and cried. That night I got another call. Same voice. Whispering. They're changing him. Not in the way you think. He's not sick. He's evolving. I screamed into the phone. Who are you? But there was only silence. Until one final sentence, just before the line went dead. He'll come back to you when he's ready. But he won't be your son anymore. I didn't sleep again after that. The next day I started digging. I found others. Parents who'd lost children to mysterious conditions. Most were silenced. Some were missing. A few had blogs or forums that were quickly shut down. But one woman agreed to talk. Her name was Lizette. Her daughter had been taken 5 years ago. We met in a park. She looked like a ghost, pale, twitchy, eyes darting everywhere. They don't die, she told me. They're repurposed. I asked what that meant. She just shook her head. They grow things inside them, she said. Not tumors. Not parasites. Seeds. Seeds of what? She looked me in the eye. Something older than us. Before I could press her, she stood up and walked away. I never saw her again. That night I dreamed of my son. He was standing at the foot of my bed, skin glowing faintly under the moonlight. His eyes were black. Not dark. Black. Like ink. Like empty holes. He opened his mouth. Worms spilled out. But they weren't writhing. They were singing. I woke up screaming. The next morning, I found muddy footprints in my kitchen. Child-sized. Bare. I didn't tell anyone about the footprints. What was I going to say? That I believed my 5-year-old son, currently under government lockdown, had snuck into my house to leave muddy prints on the linoleum like a ghost with a sense of humor? No, I just scrubbed them off. Silently, carefully, like washing away a crime. But that night I didn't sleep. I laid in bed with a kitchen knife under my pillow and the baby monitor from his old room plugged in for the first time in years. At 3:41 a.m., the monitor buzzed. White noise. Faint scratch. Then laughter. High-pitched. Soft. Familiar. It was his laugh. I got up. I didn't even hesitate. I walked through the hall, barefoot and slow, each creak of the floorboards echoing in my chest. I passed the photos on the wall, birthdays, beach trips, holidays, and paused outside his bedroom. The door was slightly open. Inside, the moonlight poured through the window in a slanted bar. Dust floated in the beam. The bed was empty, but someone had turned the night light on. The old green dinosaur-shaped one I hadn't touched in over a year. Then I saw it. A smear of mud across the pillow. Small, smudged handprints on the windowsill. And in the corner of the room by the toy chest, a bundle of worms. Wriggling slowly, like they were sleeping. I snapped the door shut and locked it. The next morning, I burned the sheets and dumped bleach across the floors. I told myself I imagined it. That I was spiraling. That trauma does weird things to memory. But the next night, the monitor buzzed again. This time, I didn't go in. I sat on the floor outside the door, knife in hand, and listened. There was movement, a whisper, and then I heard him say, in the softest voice, "Mommy, I'm hungry." I kicked open the door, but the room was empty again. Only now, the toy chest was open, and inside it, wrapped in the blanket he used as a baby, was something that made my stomach drop. A tooth, tiny, white, perfect, still bloody at the root. I picked it up with tweezers and placed it in a Ziploc. The next day, I drove to a private DNA lab I found 3 towns over. I told them it was for a custody test. A week later, they called. "It's a match," the technician said. It's his. But, ma'am, can I ask something? Sure. Did your son have any chromosomal abnormalities? No. Why? He hesitated. Because there are sequences in this sample that aren't human. I didn't know what to say. He tried to explain. Something about genome contamination, about markers they'd never seen, but my mind was spinning too fast to keep up. I hung up. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, there was a letter on my porch. No stamp, no return address, just my name written in shaky handwriting. Inside was a single photo, black and white, grainy, looked old like it came from the 1960s. It showed a boy, maybe 6 or 7, standing in a field with his arms outstretched. There were things growing out of his back. Not wings, not tumors, roots, long, thin tendrils stretching into the sky like antennae, merging with the branches of the trees behind him. On the back of the photo, scribbled in blue ink, "They're making forests out of us." I started to scream. That night, I drove back to the facility. It was different now. 2 more fences, armed guards, a drone that buzzed overhead and followed me until I turned around. But before I left, I saw something, just a flash, from the tree line. A boy, barefoot, watching me. I recognized his face. I tried to follow him into the woods, but by the time I reached the spot, he was gone. Only the echo of giggling behind the trees, and something else, the faint sound of wind chimes. Except there was no wind, no metal, just bones, clicking against each other in the branches. When I got home, the lights were on. I always turn them off when I leave. Inside, the TV was playing static. My bedroom smelled like soil, and on my bed was a small pile of leaves, damp, glistening, and shaped like a heart. Pinned to it was a note. "Come into the forest, Mommy. I'll show you where I live now." The next morning, I went to the police. I told them everything. Not the worms, not the DNA, not the monitor. Just that I believed my son had escaped the facility. That he was trying to come home. They made notes, smiled politely, promised to look into it. They never did. 2 nights later, I got another message. Not a letter. A recording. Came in the mail, tucked inside a small envelope. No writing. Just a cassette tape. I had to dig my old stereo out of the attic to play it. When I did, the tape hissed, crackled, then began. It was his voice. Low, hoarse, older. "Hi, Mommy," he said. "I miss you. I don't like it here. It's too bright. They keep giving me needles. They make me sleep in a glass box. But at night, I go to the woods. I can breathe there. I can grow." A pause. "They say I'm almost ready. When the roots come out, I'll be able to sing like the others. I don't know who they are, but they're not scary. They're soft, like clouds inside your brain." The tape hissed again. Then one last sentence. "You'll come with me soon. I know you will, because I left something in you too." I ejected the tape and dropped it, clattered to the floor. I fell to my knees and retched until there was nothing left in me. And then I did something I swore I'd never do again. I went into the woods. Not the ones behind my house. The ones behind the facility. I waited until dark. Climbed the fence again. Followed the trail I saw him take. The air was thick, sweet, like honey mixed with blood. There were no birds, no wind, just silence. Then I saw the tree. It wasn't like the others. Pulsed. His bark was flesh-like, soft, breathing, and embedded in its roots, half swallowed by the earth, was a face. His face, smiling, eyes closed, lips moving, but no sound came out. Only the wind through the leaves, whispering his voice back to me. "Mommy, come home." I don't remember walking home. The next thing I knew, I was in my bathroom, staring into the mirror, covered in mud. My shoes were gone. My palms were torn up, blistered, like I'd been digging. In my pocket was a small object wrapped in wet leaves. I unwrapped it slowly, heart pounding in my ears. It was a seed, the size of a tooth. Smooth, red as dried blood, warm to the touch. I dropped it. It didn't bounce. It sank into the tile. like the ground softened for it. I scrubbed my hands raw that night. I didn't sleep. I tried to convince myself that I had hallucinated it all, that none of it was real. But the next morning, there was a patch of moss on my kitchen floor, and from the center of that moss, the seed was growing. I called the facility, demanded to speak to someone, anyone. They told me the facility had never existed, that no one by my son's name was on record, that I was confused. I screamed into the receiver until my throat bled. Then I hung up. The moss kept growing, crept up the walls, along the baseboards. I stopped going into the kitchen. I started hearing the whispers again, not just at night, in the water pipes, in the floorboards, in the trees outside. Always the same voice. Don't fight it, Mommy. I started blacking out, losing time. Once I woke up at the edge of the forest, hands muddy, blood under my fingernails. Another time I found a dead bird on my doorstep. Not eaten, not mangled, just hollow, like something had sucked it dry from the inside. And always the moss. It was everywhere now. The entire basement, the walls behind the bookshelf, the vents. It smelled sweet, like him. That's when I made a decision. I would burn it all. I soaked the house in gasoline. Every room, every floorboard. I held the match in my hand, but just before I struck it, I heard him. Not through the walls, not through the monitor. From behind me, standing in the hall. Don't. He looked like himself. And he didn't. His face was softer. His hair too long. His eyes, not human, but filled with something I still recognized. Something that hurt to look at. Why are you doing this? I asked. He stepped forward. His feet didn't make a sound. Because the world isn't safe anymore, he said. Not for us. Not for what's coming. I backed away. What's coming? He tilted his head. It's already here. Then he touched my hand. His skin was warm. Alive. Too alive. And the match dropped from my fingers. The house didn't burn. Instead, it pulsed. The walls softened. The floor cracked open like an egg. And from below, the roots came. I don't remember much after that. But I woke up in a hospital. White walls. Machines. A nurse who wouldn't meet my eyes. They told me I had a breakdown. That I tried to light my house on fire. They didn't ask about the moss. Or the roots. Or the boy. Because the house was gone. Not burned. Not demolished. Gone. Replaced by a clearing. No trace of foundation. No scorched earth. Just flowers. And trees. Young trees. Thin. Strange. Too symmetrical. Each one the exact same height. Each one humming if you listen close enough. It's been 6 months. I don't dream anymore. Not since they removed the seed from behind my eye. They didn't tell me how it got there. I didn't ask. But sometimes, when I close my eyes in the shower or turn my face toward the sun, I feel it again. Not pain. Not fear. Calling. I think the roots are still inside me. And one day, when they're ready, I'll go back to him. Back to the forest. Back to where the trees sing in the voices of lost children. Back to where I'll finally understand what he meant when he said, "They weren't hurting me, Mommy. They were preparing me." This story was completely true, except for all the parts that weren't. Thanks for listening. That's how it happened or didn't. But if it did, don't think it couldn't happen to you. Subscribe to It Happened to Me. A new story drops daily.